Ever since the 1990s, one of Sega's biggest departments is found within Sega CS Research and Development No. 2. That team would come to be known as Sonic Team. Initially formed in 1990 through the combined efforts of staff members at Sega, notably individuals like Yuji Naka, Naoto Oshima, and Hirokazu Yasuhara, with other famous members like Takashi Iizuka joining the team a few years later, this team is most famous for creating the eponymous Sonic the Hedgehog series of games. Despite the majority of the team's resume focusing on the lovingly named Blue Blur, the team is also notorious for creating other original games of varying genres, often carrying a small but very strong following. What were these other games, and why do they matter when discussing the history of Sonic Team as an in-house development studio? That will all be answered as I talk about the other games of Sonic Team.
Genesis does
16-bit arcade graphics.
You can't do this on Nintendo. Genesis does.
Sega's premier console, the Genesis, also known as the Mega Drive in Japan and PAL regions, is still beloved by many fans ever since it initially released in 1989. It has drawn many classics that put it into a tight competition with the Super Nintendo Entertainment System. As for Sonic Team, they never really ventured too far away from Sonic at first. Their first 4 games were Sonic 1, 2, 3, and Sonic & Knuckles respectively. It wouldn't be until 1995 when they released their first game, not including Sonic. That game that would release was none other than Rystar. Initially released on February 16, 1995 in North America. The idea for a character like Rystar came from a character planning session prior to the creation of Sonic the Hedgehog. When discussing the concept of Rystar, Yuji Naka stated, "At first, we used a character that looked like a rabbit with ears that could extend and pick up objects. As the game got faster and faster, we needed to come up with a special characteristic to give our character some power over his enemies. I remembered a character I'd thought about years ago, who could roll himself into a ball and slam into enemies. Hedgehogs can roll themselves into a ball, so we decided to go from a rabbit to a hedgehog." When first being developed, the character was changed from a rabbit to an anthropomorphic star named Feel. Compared to the final release, his design was radically different, and instead of using ears to grab onto enemies, Feel used his arms to latch onto them. Here are some of the prototype screenshots that showcase what the game looked like early on. The plot centers around an evil tyrant under the name of Kaiser Greedy, who corrupts the leaders of 6 different planets and even capturing the legendary hero. In an act of desperation, the locals send a plea for help to the hero's son, Rystar. His endeavors take him through the planets of Flora, Undertow, Scorch, Sonata, Freon, and Automaton, saving the leaders from corruption. After that, Rystar squares off against Greedy himself, defeating him, saving the day, and reuniting with his father. Well, at least in the North America version. Overall, the game was received well by critics for its graphics, gameplay, and music. Unfortunately, it was criticized for its short length. The game was also a financial failure, as many fans had their eye on Sega's next console, the Saturn. Despite the high cartridge price, the game is widely available through Sega Genesis collection packs. Rystar may not have had a large impact on the Genesis as a whole, but it would mark a huge turning point in Sonic Team. This would only mark the beginning of a golden age in Sonic Team's branch out from Sonic.
"1994 saw Sega's jump into the third dimension with the release of the Sega Saturn. Many people had high hopes for the Saturn, as it was said to be a stiff competitor to the Sony PlayStation, and the console had a very successful launch in Japan. Determined to gain a head start over Sony's soon-to-be-released console, Tom Kalinske, the then Sega of America CEO, announced that the Saturn was already released at E3 1995 and was retailing for $399 US. However, while this seemed like a valid marketing tactic, the plan would ultimately be one of the console's biggest misfires. Frustrated customers who wanted a Saturn had a lot of trouble, as only 4 stores carried the console on release and would ultimately be out of stock at most locations. Plus, the launch lineup was notoriously poorly received, as most of the games were subject to being rushed to release on launch with the Saturn. The PlayStation, on the other hand, was in no hurry to release right away and retailed for a much more affordable $299 US. Thus, the games released on launch could take more time to ensure their quality without having to follow a strict time limit. Also, the hardware of the Sega Saturn, while technologically impressive with the use of 2 graphic processors, made the Saturn very hard to develop for due to the use of quadrilaterals for 3D rendering compared to the PlayStation and N64, which utilized triangles, which was far easier to work with. Despite the odds of successful game releases being slim compared to the PlayStation, Sonic Team would not be deterred by the gravity of the situation. If anything, the Saturn Era is where Sonic Team took the most experimental approaches to their releases. Their first jump into the third dimension would come in the form of a flying action game that would go to be titled Nights into Dreams. Nights into Dreams was released on July 5th, 1996 worldwide. In an interview with Sega Saturn magazine, Yuji Naka talked about the concept of this game. He had said, "I headed back to Japan so that I could work with Mr. Oshima, and while I was waiting for the plane to take off, I thought, let's make a game where we can fly. So I guess that's where it all started." When he got back to Japan, the team analyzed works by Sigmund Freud and Carl Jung, as well as Cirque du Soleil's Mystere performance to provide inspiration for the game's setting in Nightopia, where all good dreams occur. In Nights into Dreams, the player assumes control of one of 2 characters, Claire Sinclair or Elliot Edwards, as they travel to Nightopia to help rescue Knights, a non-binary creature, in exchange for helping them escape from their nightmares. Elliot wanting to win against some older kids in basketball, and Claire's wanting to overcome stage fright due to having a lead role in a play. In the game, Knights is one of the creations of Wiseman the Wicked, the evil ruler of Nightmaren, the evil part of the dream world. Knights and their brother Reala are tasked with taking over Nightopia and eventually conquering the real world as well. However, Knights rebels against this idea and ends up turning to the good side, opting to restore good dreams to Nightopia. As punishment for their rebellious nature, Wiseman traps Knights in a soul prison, which prompts Clarice and Elliot to free Knights and assist in restoring peace to the dream world. The protagonists hold an embodiment of a positive human trait, known in-game as an idia. The red one, which embodies the trait of courage, is given to Knights, where they are temporarily freed from the soul prison and fused with one of the characters. From there, the player has a set amount of time to find the 4 other idias within 4 other mares, or sections of the world, as well as getting as high of a score as possible by performing tricks in the air such as loops. If the player finds all other idias, Knights will be freed from the soul prison, where they can take out the demons of Nightmaren, which act as the game's bosses, Reala and Wiseman included. Ultimately, after Knights defeats all bosses in Nightmare, Clarice and Elliot are free from their nightmares and overcome their fears. Upon the game's release, an analog controller was packed in with the game for easier control of Knights. The controller, fittingly called the Knight's controller, would serve as the definitive controller of the console throughout the rest of its lifespan. The game received positive reviews from critics, often citing it as one of the best of the Saturn's lifespan. The game was praised for its visuals and soundtrack, though some complained of the controls being somewhat janky and the level design being nauseating. A spin-off called Knight's Journey into Dreams was released on the Wii in 2007. While it may have been a killer app for the Saturn, it just could not keep up with the rampant success of the PlayStation and the Nintendo 64. The Saturn was all but doomed, but Sonic Team had one more game they wished to release on the Saturn. "1998 saw the end of a failed console and the rise of a new one, hoping to salvage Sega's competitive ability in the market. That console would be the Sega Dreamcast, boasting a much more impressive launch lineup, including the highly anticipated Sonic Adventure, serving as Sonic's proper jump into the third dimension, as Sonic 3D Blast was technically his first, but ended up being a failed attempt at bringing the Hedgehog to a new perspective. Before Sonic Team was ready to move on to the Dreamcast, they somehow managed to squeeze one more release into the Saturn before moving on. In 1996, after the release of Nights into Dreams and the Christmas Nights expansion, Sonic Team got to work on a game featuring a slightly more realistic set of protagonists. It was then that Sonic Team started work on a game centering around a team of firefighters. After 2 years of work, Sonic Team would release Burning Rangers on February 26, 1998 worldwide. Sega Saturn magazine did a Q&A with Yuji Naka about Burning Rangers. He wanted to make a set of protagonists that revolved more around saving people rather than destroying enemies. He was quoted as saying the following: "We wanted to create a game where you could rescue people. Nowadays, there are so many games where you just kill people. Instead, we decided to make a rescue game." In addition, right from the start, it seemed that fire was the most appropriate way to create that sensation of fear and tension. So in the end, we combined these two elements. He also elaborated that the name Burning Rangers was derived from Burning having a sort of go for it type of personality, while Rangers being sort of a note on both park rangers protecting land from forest fires and heroes akin to that of the Super Sentai genre of TV shows, which was very popular in Japan throughout the late 90s. Burning Rangers was sort of a far cry from other Sonic Team games, focusing more on exploration of the levels at a slower pace rather than the speed of Sonic the Hedgehog and Nights into Dreams. Plus, the game was a third-person shooter and had no defined antagonist, helping to make the image of the Burning Rangers as respected firefighters all over Earth more realistic, instead of a group of heroes focusing on one source of evil. The player controls one of two characters, Sho Amabane or Tillis, the two newest recruits of the Burning Rangers. They are guided through training, meeting the other Rangers along the way, Chris Parton, Reed Phoenix, and Big Landman. Chris is the game's mission control, providing guidance on where to go and what the player's current objective is. Reed teaches basic maneuvers, such as moving and jumping, as well as avoiding fires that explode out. And Big serves as a veteran firefighter, often providing assistance to the team as needed. By using blasters they are given, fires can be turned into energy crystals, which serve as your health in the game, as well as being used to transport civilians at the respective locations to hospitals. Combat is mostly divided between two attacks: a light attack that, while it doesn't do much damage, gives the player energy crystals for their troubles, and a heavy attack that, while its damage is far greater, will not give the player energy crystals. Thus, players have to think about which attack will be best for the situation at hand. After training is completed, the group is immediately thrusted into 4 levels throughout the game, with each mission slowly becoming more complex, such as traversing through a botanical research facility which caught fire because of a giant carnivorous plant, to a mechanical fire in an aquarium where the facility was thought to be closed, but there were tourists that were caught there, making the mission much more complex. Eventually, either Sho or Tillis encounters a girl named Iria Klein, who is placed into space because of an incurable disease, to which Iria informs that her ship is set on a crash course to Earth, where it will desolate the planet if it crashes into Earth. Eventually, the Rangers are able to stop the ship from crashing into Earth. Iria is cured of her disease, and she joins the Burning Rangers as a trainee, while Sho and Tillis officially become full-time members. It's very possible that the mechanics of the game would go on to inspire the E102 Gamma stages and the Mech Shooter stages in Sonic Adventure and Sonic Adventure 2 respectively. Also, the idea of a space station crashing into Earth is possible inspiration for the last story in Sonic Adventure 2 as well. Alas though, Burning Rangers was well received, with one critic from GamePro magazine under the alias of Major Mike praising the game as a roaring good time, though criticizing the game for having tepid controls, recommending that players play through the training stages multiple times before diving into the game. However, because the Saturn was considered a dead console in favor of the Dreamcast releasing in a few months, the game sold very poorly. According to PriceCharting.com, a loose copy of Burning Rangers currently retails for approximately $205 US, with a complete in-box copy retailing for $525 US, making it one of the most valuable games on the Saturn besides Panzer Dragoon Saga.
The launch of the Sega Dreamcast was a huge refresher for Sega, as they saw much more success on launch with games like Sonic Adventure, Soul Calibur, as well as the start of the 2K sports games, released by Amusement Visions, though they would be bought out by Take-Two Interactive in 2005. As for Sonic Team, they had 3 non-Sonic games on the Sega Dreamcast. The first of these was ChuChu Rocket, released on November 11, 1999 in Japan, with the US seeing a release on March 7, 2000. The game is an action puzzle game where the player controls a group of mice, known as the ChuChus, as they go through each level while avoiding the Kapu Kapu in order to reach their rocket ship. It's quite literally a game of cat and mouse. Anyway, the game was intended to showcase the power of the Dreamcast, as it could show multiple models on the screen at once, like how Super Mario 128 showed the power of the GameCube. This game also introduced online play for the Dreamcast. Though some had complained about it being super slow, this feature would bring about another game on the Dreamcast, which I'll get into in a few moments. Overall though, ChuChu Rocket received positive reviews due to the game's addictive gameplay and cutesy graphics, with such ratings as 9 out of 10 on IGN and 34 out of 40 on Famitsu magazine. Just about a month later, another game by Sonic Team would enter the scene and bring a party like no other. Samba de Amigo, released on December 11, 1999 in arcades with a Dreamcast port releasing in 2000, was a rhythm game that involved the use of controllers shaped like maracas. The player controls a monkey named Amigo, as he is the leader of an instrumental troupe as they party all over Carnival Island. The player can choose an assortment of songs, ranging from Latino songs to some pop songs like Tub Thumping, Take On Me, and Livin' La Vida Loca, among others. The party continued when Gearbox Software struck a deal with Sega to remake the game for the Wii in 2007, fittingly utilizing the Wii Remote and Nunchuck instead of the Maraca controllers. The game mostly received positive reviews from critics. As stated earlier, ChuChu Rocket introduced online play on the Sega Dreamcast. The game that really expanded on the idea was Phantasy Star Online, released on December 21st, 2000. Online gaming was not particularly common in Japan at the time, with games like Diablo and EverQuest seeing far more success in the West. So creating a game to bring the two sides of the world together was the prime focus that Sonic Team wanted to achieve. Also, games like Diablo were MMORPGs, which could hold multiple players in one lobby. And considering the time constraints, as well as the limitations of the Dreamcast, Yuji Naka did not want to create a game like that, focusing more on a smaller lobby that could help with achieving goals more efficiently rather than playing with numerous members across the world. The game featured numerous story updates throughout its lifespan, which encouraged sticking to the online service, a feature that's very common with games today like Monster Hunter and Genshin Impact, among others. While the game has been long out of support because of Sega's withdrawal from the console market, private servers are still being run to this day. The Dreamcast was a surprisingly successful endeavor for Sega compared to the Saturn, but the PlayStation 2 would immediately destroy any chances of the console seeing any more success. With this, the final nail in the coffin was hammered on, and Sega had to make one of the most important decisions in gaming history.
After the Dreamcast was retired with a disappointing lifespan at best, and all the fans in Japan had gone gaga for Sega one last time, Sega made the decision to withdraw from the console market and become a third-party developer for the now big three: Microsoft, Sony, and oddly, Nintendo, much to the shock of many Genesis fans. Sega released more than a few exclusives to the GameCube, notably Sonic Adventure 2 Battle, Sonic Adventure DX, and Sonic Mega Collection, though an enhanced version of the game titled Sonic Mega Collection Plus would release on the PS2 and Xbox a couple years later. One of the exclusives that did not feature Sonic, though, is Billy Hatcher and the Giant Egg, released on September 23, 2003 for the GameCube. Right away, people who own the game will notice the sign that says, "From the creators of Sonic the Hedgehog," as well as Billy Hatcher's design having the recognizable Sonic-style artwork. The game takes place in Morningland, where all the chickens live peacefully, when the Dark Raven and his group of crows assault the land, covering it in darkness. Meanwhile, Billy Hatcher meets up with his friends after being late when the chirping of a chick catches their attention. Two of the Dark Raven's soldiers prepare to dive bomb on the chick, but Billy defends it from the ravens. The chick ends up sending Billy and friends to Morningland, where Billy and his friends don chicken suits, and they must put a stop to the Dark Raven once and for all. The game functions as a typical platformer, but Billy does not behave like his hedgehog counterpart. Usually he cannot do anything other than running and jumping, but once he finds an egg, then his potential increases exponentially. You can use said egg to bounce higher, roll over enemies, and of course, roll on it for much greater momentum. Billy is guided by Menifune, god of the chickens, who can provide important tips and tricks on how to play the game. Players of the game should be wary of the egg taking damage, as there is a gauge that documents how much damage the egg has taken before it breaks. In order to clear a specific stage, players usually have to be wary of completing the objective that is assigned to them. There is no one definitive way to complete the stage, other than usually revolving around collecting something, saving your friends, or defeating a boss. The game received mixed to positive reviews from critics, with those praising it for its music and graphics, but criticizing it for its physics, the camera, and the shallow plot. It was a commercial bomb, however, only selling around 250,000 copies worldwide. To go back a couple years, besides being exclusively known for Sonic, Sonic Team is also known for popularizing a puzzle game out in the West, Puyo Puyo. Initially a property of Compile, Puyo Puyo was relatively unheard of in the West. Well, kind of. In fact, there were actually two Puyo Puyo games released in the West during the Compile era, just under different names: Dr. Robotnik's Mean Bean Machine and Kirby's Avalanche, released on the Genesis and Super Nintendo respectively. It wouldn't be until 2001 when the West finally got a game that featured the cast of Puyo Puyo. That game released would be Puyo Pop, released on the Game Boy Advance by Sega, Sonic Team, and published by THQ in North America. This marked the beginning of the Sonic Team era of Puyo Puyo, which still continues on to this day. For the sake of time, there are a lot of Puyo Puyo games released by Sonic Team, so I'll only talk about the games that are important to the series at hand. Puyo Pop stars Arl as she and her buddy Carbuncle find a mysterious item that materializes a gate out of nowhere. Carbuncle chases after it, prompting Arl to give chase to Carbuncle, which ends up resulting in meeting with various characters and fighting in Puyo Puyo, which ends up resulting in meeting with the Dark Prince as usual. Puyo Puyo's gameplay is relatively unique, though usually what you have to do is link Puyos, or colored blobs, together in a set of 4. Usually it's good practice to learn to combo Puyos, so that you can dump garbage Puyos on your opponents, which will basically prevent them from linking combos together as well as dumping garbage Puyos on you. Puyo Pop Fever, released in 2004 on the GameCube, PS2, and Nintendo DS, among other consoles, introduced the Fever gimmick in Puyo Puyo, where the player can accrue a lot of points from popping a lot of the Puyos on screen, hopefully linking a bunch of combos. This game was meant to be a reboot to the series, introducing new characters and basically expanding upon the universe of Puyo Puyo. Those characters would include Amity and Rafina, among many others. The player either controls Amity or Rafina as they search for their teacher, Misacord's cane, which seems to have gone missing. The next game I'm talking about is Puyo Puyo 7, released on the Nintendo DS in Japan in 2009. This game would introduce another new set of characters, specifically Ringo and her set of friends, as they go around the area figuring out why Puyos are flooding the area, as well as Arl acting very, very strange. Overall, not really much is different from the likes of Puyo Pop Fever. The most important of the list is Puyo Puyo Tetris, released on February 6, 2014 in Japan, with the West seeing localization on April 25, 2017 in the US, and April 28th in the PAL regions. The game was made as a joint effort between Sega, Sonic Team, and the Tetris Company, and it worked. Considering Tetris was one of the most popular puzzle games in the West, thanks to the hard work of Mr. Alexei Pajitnov, and Puyo Puyo was one of the most popular puzzle games in Japan, the game served as an amazing crossover. The game stars the aforementioned 3 protagonists as their world ends up getting invaded with Tetraminos. The team ends up getting transported onto the SS Tetra, where they cross paths with members of the Tetris universe, prompting everybody to work together and hopefully restore peace to both dimensions. The game uses both gameplay elements from Tetris and Puyo Puyo, as well as incorporating new gameplay elements, specifically swap mode, where you alternate between Puyo Puyo and Tetris before the opponent loses. The game received positive reviews from critics, with PlayStation Lifestyle magazine ranking the game as an 8.0 out of 10, saying it's an example of a franchise entry done right, though the writer did complain about the Big Bang mode in the game. The game also received a Puzzle Game Award from the National Academy for Video Game Trade Reviewers, or Navigator for short. A sequel, Puyo Puyo Tetris 2, was released on December 8, 2020 for the Nintendo Switch, PS4, Xbox One, PS5, and Xbox Series X, with a Steam release being released on March 23, 2021. As much as Sonic Team has been known for creating these games meant for all ages, they have also been known for creating a few adult-oriented games, and fittingly, they used the Nintendo DS to satisfy this demographic. The first was Field of Magic XYXX, released on November 16, 2004, with Japan seeing release on December 2, 2004, and Europe getting it on March 11, 2005. The game was a minigame compilation that used both the stylus and microphone. The player controls a male protagonist tasked with pleasing a female that he has fallen in love with, though said female does not think the same of him. By succeeding at minigames, the woman will slowly gain affection for the male. However, the player character has a rival that also wants to win her over you, so that puts even more pressure on the player to please the protagonist's love interest. Development for the game commenced after Sega disbanded United Game Artists, a subsidiary of Sega, in 2003. Members Takumi Yoshinaga and Takashi Yuta, who worked on Space Channel 5, were absorbed into Sonic Team. Yuta would eventually go on to work on Sonic Riders, while Yoshinaga would develop Field of Magic. The game received mostly positive reviews. Famitsu magazine rated it a 33 out of 40, and the New York Times also reviewed it favorably, saying that the game often lets you bypass annoying games in favor of entertaining ones, so the ratio of fun to aggravation is pretty good. The game was not reviewed as favorably by the Sydney Morning Herald, rating it 3 stars out of 5, with the reviewer saying, completed minigames can be played individually with increasing difficulty, but there is little long-term appeal once the delightfully barmy story is finished. The success of Field of Magic XYXX prompted the team to develop a prequel to the game, which featured similar gameplay. On October 20th, 2005 in Japan, the Rub Rabbits was released on the DS, with a US and European release in early 2006. The game plays nearly identically to its counterpart, being a minigame collection where the male protagonist has to impress a female love interest, often by rescuing them from perilous situations. The game received average reviews. The AV Club gave the game a C+, saying that true love takes more than moony-eyed flirting. Sega needs to get the mechanics right to make the magic happen. The Sydney Morning Herald rated the game 2.5 stars out of 5, saying that inventive, creative, and strangely compelling, but the more difficult tasks can be frustrated and its lasting appeal is limited. Up till now, the last game that does not feature Sonic the Hedgehog is a sequel to the hit Dreamcast game Phantasy Star Online, simply titled Phantasy Star Online 2. The game is a free-to-play online role-playing game that, like its predecessor, encourages playing with multiple people, either locally or across the globe. The game first saw a release in Japan in 2012, with a worldwide release much later in 2020. The story is split between multiple episodes, though the story begins with the player character graduating from a cadet program through the organization ARCS. Sega COO Naoyo Tsurumi said the game took over 5 years to develop, and that Sega pulled out all the stops to ensure that the game would be a great entry point into the free-to-play game market. Payment for the game comes in the form of DLCs that include outfits for further character customization. The game received mixed to positive reviews, with critics praising the story and visuals, though criticizing the implementation of microtransactions. It's no surprise to see that Sonic Team has branched out to other genres, rather than sticking to the Sonic the Hedgehog games. Overall though, while there hasn't been as many original games released by one of the biggest divisions of Sega, they are still a very profitable division, even if the reputation is slightly more variable. In the end, these games fascinate me, as they not only piqued interest in those who were familiar with Sonic the Hedgehog, but also even those who never played a Sonic game prior or any game period. It is indeed a good reminder of how much video games bring people together and change many lives at the same time.